I'm very well. So everything is ready. I would like to welcome all the wonderful participants of the webinar. And to begin with, I would like to welcome Chase, whom I'm also meeting for the first time, face-to-face, but online. And therefore, I would like to say why we are in touch with Chase. This is one of the situations that have been made possible thanks to the cooperation with American Embassy in Warsaw, represented, as far as I'm concerned, by Beata Milewska, Cultural Affairs Specialist, and US Consulate in Krakow, represented by Majka Brzostek, Educational Advisor. So thank you very much. And now over to Chase. Chase's profile has been presented to me, and I'm also learning, just like all the webinar participants, I'm learning who Chase is and which are the areas of his activity. So MA TESOL, writing and language educator, that's what you wrote in your bio, and your research interests are numerous, among others, multilingual writing, that is a very interesting area, discourse analysis, English composition pedagogy, English as an international language, and last but not least, high impact practices of engaged learning. This year, Chase is with us. Yes, he is located in Radom for the whole 22-23 academic year, as he is visiting English language fellow at the Kazimierz Pułaski University of Technology and Humanities in Radom. And today, you will inspire us with your expertise on how to design effective conversation classes. And that is a very important area of communication that we would like all of our students to be experts in as early as possible. So designing more effective and engaging conversation classes for different levels of English language learners. Also potentially useful methodologies and techniques to make them talk. And last but not least, budding subject of translanguaging, as you named it in your summary, just to show how sharing first language by teachers and students can make it easier for students to be proficient in the target language. So that is my case, for example. So I'm all ears and I'm ready for this highly practical session. So over to you.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'd like to start off by just saying what a pleasure it is to be here with you. So from this brief introduction, you've heard of me. You know that I am currently in Radom, where I teach at UTH. At UTH Radom, I'm working as an English language fellow. And this is through the American Embassy in Warsaw. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to travel quite a bit around Poland to visit various high schools, to visit the American corners in the area of Poland that I'm in. And it's all been a fantastic experience. Prior to coming to Poland, I lived in the Middle East for 4 years, and where I taught at the United Arab Emirates University. I taught English for academic purposes with a focus on academic writing there, and developed writing curriculum. And before that, I lived in the United States. I taught at Auburn University, which is a large university in the southeast of the United States. So anyways, I just wanted to say that it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all. As I was thinking about potential topics for this webinar, I was thinking, what would be the most practical thing I could talk about, which might reach the most people, right? And what came to mind was conversation classes. Conversation classes are quite unique because you can effectively target all 4 language domains in a conversation class. So there's a lot you can do linguistically. in these classes. If you're interested in the slides, I'm just going to draw an arrow right there. You can scan this QR code, and you can follow along via the document that links to. Again, my name is Chase Brame, and if you want to reach out to me, please do. You can email me, whether at my work email, and this is my personal email. Okay, so it's a big topic, right? Effective practices in conversation classes. So I just wanted to start off by kind of outlining the objectives of what we're going to do in today's session, and then we'll get into it. Okay. So we're going to start off with this activity. Normally with an in-person session, I would probably want to do this activity with you all as participants, but being that we're meeting online, I think it's more effective if I just walk through how I might use this activity with a group of students. So this is a notice wonder activity. Moving on, we're going to talk about the benefits of incorporating joy and playfulness into a conversation class, and how that might lead us towards that positive outcome of growing the students' language proficiency. So we'll talk about that. And then probably the last large point that I wanted to cover in this workshop is just talking about the traditional discussion. I think we can all reflect upon perhaps our time in university, or perhaps our time or just, you know, the classes we teach every single day and the discussions we have with our students, and thinking about some ways to mix this up and perhaps to have you know, a different approach. So I didn't add it to the objectives, but we will briefly talk about translanguaging, as was mentioned in the introduction of this workshop. However, you know, with the time constraints, I'm not positive how deep we'll get into that conversation, which is why I haven't listed it here. I wanted to emphasize to you that through each of these things we do today, we're going to discuss the pedagogical rationale, right? So we're going to think about specifically why we might do these things, right? So with that being said, let's start off by just talking about what I just did, right? Let's talk about the benefits of stating lesson objectives, right? So in my opinion, this is a very important thing for students, yeah? Because it lets them know, first of all, what to expect, right? When you tell the students what you're going to do in a class, it's definitely letting them know, you know, it's giving them a timeline, basically, of what's going to be done in class. In addition to that, I got a bit ahead of myself, but it gives the students a rationale, both for what and why they're doing class activities. So it's goal focused, right? I think it's pretty easy with a conversation class to go in and perhaps just to have a nice conversation. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we always want to be objective focused, trying to target a specific area of growth with the students. So stating lesson objectives, this is something that's beneficial for the students because it lets them know really what the target is, where they're expected to grow. But another benefit is it can keep you as the instructor organized. It kind of gives you an agenda of what you're going to cover. And that way the benefit is twofold. Okay. So moving on, I wanted to preface this entire session with just one big goal that I personally hope to achieve in every conversation class that I teach. And that's this really big term known as communicative competence, right? And there's a lot to unpack with that term. It's quite large, but in its simplest definition, we could perhaps say communicative competence is the ability to use language to accomplish the goal at hand, the task at hand, right? So in conversation classes, we're basically preparing students to be successful using the language. And with that being said, we want this to be we want it to be a simulation. We want it to be realistic and reflective of how they're actually going to be expected to use the language in real life. So with that being said, all the activities that I do with students, I tend to avoid textbooks. What I prefer instead, I prefer real organic materials that are focused upon like issues that are currently happening in the world, or things of high interest to the students that they might enjoy discussing. Yeah. So with that being said, let's move into this first activity that I wanted to show to you. And I really, really love this activity in a conversation class. Note that this activity is going to incorporate multiple language domains, right? As I mentioned at the beginning, I like conversation classes because you can integrate different skills into it, yeah? So this notice wonder activity, what's really great about it is you can incorporate quite a bit of differentiation into it, yeah? So how I would present this to students is I would first give them a handout that's relevant or of high interest to them. Because you're a group of teachers, I've chosen an educational graph here, right? But the main thing is you want some kind of graph or representation of data or something like this, something kind of open-ended, okay? And what you might first do with your students, yeah, is you're just trying to figure out their background knowledge, right? So you're going to ask the students to just write down everything that you notice about this graph, right? And this could be really just anything that they notice, right? But the main thing is it's concrete, yeah? So it's just observations of what is there, right? And after you've given them some time to think, you move on and you say, okay, now turn to the person next to you and you discuss your observations, right? So you're giving the students something to talk about. Basically, this is a task-based conversation, right? So the students, you gave them some time to think, to collect their answers, to organize their thoughts, even solidify it in writing, and then they're ready to discuss it with a classmate. Okay, so then moving forward, right, we would transition back to individual student work, and the students would have an opportunity now to wonder about the graph, right? And this is also, in my opinion, very, very important in conversation classes, giving the student chances to inquire, yeah? So this could be, when they wonder, it could be a range of things, but basically they're trying to figure out things that are not so clear, yeah? Things that they're not really sure about. And then again, you turn it over, you've given them a moment to think, and they can discuss the observations again with a partner or somebody else around them. All right. So as the students are doing this, I'm collecting data. Yeah, I'm looking at how the students are performing both individually and how they're performing in the conversation itself, right? And then I would probably continue this activity by having the students work together, combining their knowledge to respond to some type of question, such as how I wrote a sample question here, just talking about how does the methodology affect student language learning. This would be easily amenable to whatever graph you give the students, yeah. But I think when we think about an activity like notice and wonder, there's a lot we could consider in terms of the takeaway of the activity. And one of the big takeaways is that I'm sure you can relate to this, but in my conversation classes, I have a huge range of proficiency levels, right? I have students who are A2, I have students who are C1, I have students who literally grew up in England. They used English as their primary language for most of their lives, and they've come back to Poland, right? I also have students who perhaps they haven't had too much exposure to using the language authentically, so they struggle to get their thoughts out, right? With the Notice Wonder activity, what I really like about it is it acknowledges that students are at different levels, and it gives them each something to contribute, right? It gives them each something that they can do. I mean, at the very least, a student, they could be notating like what numbers correspond with the different methods, for example. Yeah. So it doesn't require a huge, a high level of linguistic proficiency, right? But if you are highly proficient, it does give you a lot of room to elaborate upon that. Yeah. So something else I really like about it is it's giving, I mentioned this before, but an activity like this gives me a lot of data, right? With something like this, I can really see where my students are, and I can still engage them. Yeah. As I mentioned before, so that with this graph, we've got a lot of info. Yeah. And an activity like this, it's really just, it's encouraging students to do what we hope they would do anyways, which is take their time with the information, not rush, but really just collect their ideas. Yeah. Moving on, one thing that I like about this activity, and it is kind of connected to this thought I made up here, but I think with a lot of students using English, confidence could be an issue. For whatever reason, they may like underestimate their abilities, right? So giving them some kind of open-ended task like this, just write down the facts you see, write down the questions you can think of. This is something that everybody can be successful in doing. And I've noticed that with students, when they feel like they're successful, for one, this makes classroom management a breeze, because the students are, when you're doing well at something, it's obviously more fun, right? But also it perhaps encourages them to take more risks with the language in the future. Yeah. Just a little bit more on the takeaway, and then I'll just leave a moment for any questions about this. And I think I might be repeating myself here, so I'll briefly just go over this, but this is a good activity because it's giving the teacher data, everyone can contribute, and yeah, I think we can summarize the takeaway with that. So I'd like to take a brief pause and just see if there's any questions or comments about this first activity I've shown you, and then we could proceed. Any examples of other graphs? Yeah, for sure. Like, for example, something with fossil fuels could be a really good one. That could be good. And you could find data from just some respected organization, I'm sure you could, use your discretion on that. So yeah, I've used something with fossil fuels that works really well, or renewable energy, or something like that. It really just depends on what you want to talk about. But data, I like data because it's non-linguistic, but it leaves a lot of room for the students to expand upon it linguistically. Are there any questions? Perhaps no? Okay. Well, if anything comes up, please just just let me know. So moving on, another part of an effective conversation class to me, which I find to be just so important with students, especially university students with whom I work with, is finding ways to incorporate joy and playfulness. Yeah. I guess I should preface, it's a common question I get because I am a guest here in Poland. So a lot of teachers will ask me, like, what do you think is like the biggest struggle that Polish students face in the classroom when learning English? And 100% my answer is this right here. You know, for university students in Poland, a lot of them, well, I would say a huge, well, I hate to speak in generalities, but I would say like for a majority of students, the majority of media they consume is English or has some English in it, right? What that means is students are constantly exposed to what they consider to be correct English or some level of perfect, right? So they have a pretty good idea of what English should look like, yeah, which is good, right? But also it creates this sort of dilemma where perhaps they're comparing their own ability to that, and it can cause a bit of stage fright with students. So as students think about what is perfect English, they may be reluctant to use their own English out of, I don't know, being self-conscious or something, because they feel that their ability is not as accurate as they wish, right? So what I've found is one of the best ways to resolve this insecurity with students is just through incorporating some sort of joyful activities, right? Something that makes them laugh, something that makes them smile. And through this, the goal that I'm seeking to achieve with my students is basically to make this mistake-friendly environment where you know, students you know, they're more focused on having a good time rather than worrying about making a mistake. Because as I mentioned at the beginning, the goal of a conversation class is not accuracy necessarily. I mean, being accurate matters, yeah? But what really matters is just communicative competence, yeah? The ability to express yourself, yeah? To get to say what you want out there, yeah? So that's really what we're hoping to train our students to be able to do through a conversation class. So I just want to show you perhaps something I would do personally to get the students perhaps you know, feeling a bit more joyful in the classroom. So like, all right, this looks a bit bleak, yeah? Like I have a list of like 8 important every bit of content I've given you, all the pedagogical materials are related to conversation classes. So I would give the students different terms depending on what, you know, whatever you're talking about in class. Like I did something similar recently talking about cancel culture, right? Where I gave them terms related to cancel culture. Anyways, first of all, I just give the students an opportunity to research individually, yeah? But then what I think makes this fun, right? So they've had this opportunity for individual research and you incorporate illustrations, yeah? So basically tell the students to draw a key term, yeah? One of these key terms and just label it, yeah? I know this sounds a bit juvenile, right? But with university students, I've found that they rarely get asked to draw, and they quite enjoy the opportunity, yeah? Students will probably make jokes about how they don't know how to draw, or that their drawing is really bad or something, yeah? They might make jokes about that. And we'll talk about why that's a good thing in a moment, yeah? But anyways, the students, basically, I would have them define these, then they would draw a key term, and then we would just do some kind of mingle in the classroom where students would walk around and show everybody their picture. And there would be an opportunity for them to talk about their picture, talk about what it means, yeah, or why they chose to draw it in a certain way. As a kind of a companion to this activity, you could give the students, especially if they're lower proficiency, you could give them some stems, right? In order to like facilitate this conversation. With higher level students, it's probably not going to be as important, but definitely with students probably B1 plus or lower, you would probably want to give them some kind of structured stems like these. I particularly like to incorporate drawing in the classroom because it helps students, it helps them think of concepts in a different way, right? You know, most of our students are not artists. Some are fantastic. Yeah, but probably most of them have just ordinary drawing abilities, right? And you know, when you're not a good artist, for example, and you draw one of these terms, you're still making deep connections. Yeah, you're making logical decisions. With this, the students, they're addressing these concepts in a deeper way, and they're drawing with their classmates unconventional connections with these ideas. Yeah, so you know, perhaps showing this term in a different mode of communication, it can kind of jump through the affective filter that students might have. It could kind of jump through any anxieties they might have and catch them off guard. Yeah, so this information is just being interpreted in a different way. And as I mentioned, so students probably are going to roll their eyes at you at first, yeah, if you do ask them to draw like some terms or something. But drawing, I believe, is one of the best way to lower stakes and to you know, bring in some joy into the classroom. It's actually quite hilarious. Yeah, I've had experiences with my students where the drawings are just so funny, and we've all had a good laugh about it. And I think we could all agree that in the conversation classroom, laughing is one of the something that we should definitely be doing. Yeah. When you're having a good time in the classroom, you're definitely going to be more successful, probably, compared to if you're miserable, right? So definitely just getting the students to as I say here, to just laugh and play with the language. That's really what we're going for here. So just a couple other things you could do to like bring this activity forward a bit more and to incorporate joy and playfulness, as I call it. Well, first of all, you could bring in some props, yeah, and you could have the students write like skits, and you know, they could film themselves like making funny videos or something, or whatever. Yeah, the main thing is you just want to get them talking using the language, and trying to just break out of the you know, the standard norms of what they might expect when they go into a conversation class. So that's what I have for this section. I'm going to move forward now, and I wanted to show you just a few alternatives to sorry, there was a question about this. Let me just go back to that. Yeah, I would have them do this in class, honestly. You could do a backwards, you know, you could flip the class. You could tell them to do it for homework and to come in to class with this prepared. It just depends on your teaching environment, but either one would work. It would just, whatever you choose would affect your planning on that, how you choose to have the students do it. Personally, I like to have them write with me in the classroom, because I can make sure that things like plagiarism aren't happening. I can monitor their performance. I guess you all know with ChatGPT and things like this, students really, they're, in my opinion, they're becoming a bit over-reliant on tools. So I personally like to monitor the writing process, but whatever, either way would work. So I wanted to show a couple of different, moving forward, I wanted to show a couple of different alternatives to traditional discussion activities. And the first thing I wanted to show you, and I really love this discussion format. This is called the Fishbowl discussion. I think perhaps you might be familiar with this, perhaps not, but I've had a lot of really great success with this. So basically, the way this activity works, there's a couple of variations on it, but usually what you're going to do is you're going to start off, you're going to have some kind of discussion topic, okay? And after you give the students the discussion topic, you're going to pair them up, and the students are going to work in pairs, yeah? And as the students are working in pairs, they're basically trying to prepare each other for the discussion, right? So then whenever the class is ready, you're monitoring, you're seeing their performance there. You're going to give in the pairs, you're going to say there's an A and a B, okay? And the way it's going to work is the students who are inside of the fishbowl, right? Let's say that these are the A's, yeah? They're going to engage in a conversation about this topic, okay? So they're going to, just have a normal conversation about it. Meanwhile, what's going to be happening on the outside, right? The B's, so they're going to be monitoring their partner, right? And you might need to coach them on how to do this, but essentially this is a metacognitive task. So inside of the bowl, we could say that these are our cognitive folks, they're thinking, right? They're engaging in a discussion. On the outside, we've got our metacognitive. And all they're doing is they're just focusing on the meta-linguistic features that is happening inside of the bowl, specifically how their partner is performing, and they're going to give them feedback, yeah. And after the discussion, so you pair them up, you have this discussion, and so you've got the discussion, you've got the A's have their job, the B's each have a job, right? Then you're going to end the discussion, and then they're going to pair up again, and the B's are going to essentially tell the A's, they're going to reflect on their performance. They're going to give them advice and give them some feedback on how they did, right? And then perhaps you want to do some kind of variation. You definitely, this is where it's up to you as the instructor, like how the class is doing, but you definitely could continue the activity. You could have another discussion, and this time you could flip them, yeah, where you put the B's on the inside, the A's on the outside. But the main thing is that the students, what I find with conversation classes is it's quite difficult to get all the students engaged. Like you'll have a few students who are kind of dominating the conversation, but you'll have a lot of students who are perhaps they're just kind of like a fly on the wall or something. Yeah, they're not really joining in as much as you would hope. So I feel that when a student is being monitored by a peer, this does encourage them to perhaps be a bit more aware and a bit more participatory. So this is the Fishbowl discussion, which I really like. And on that thread that we just discussed regarding the getting students engaged, trying to find a way to encourage the conversation to perhaps reach more members of the classroom, right? We could perhaps talk about the Harkness model. So this is another alternative to the traditional discussion, which I really like. Harkness was a professor at Harvard University. He came up with this really great method. So what the goal is here is to have the room essentially be more student-centered. Yeah, with this traditional model of conversation that we see here, yeah, we can see it's very teacher-directed, and I find this is an issue that I regularly encounter in the classroom. Students will kind of like, even when they present, like they'll look to me, right? Because they know I'm giving them the grade. They know that I'm for whatever reason, I'm sure you can relate that the students generally they look to the teacher for the discussion. Yeah. So with the Harkness model, basically you let the students know that everybody needs to speak. Yeah. Everybody, it's very important that everybody is speaking. You can draw the map if you want, or you can have a student who with whom you trust. They can do it, but essentially it's very simple. Like, so you have a discussion topic, and the students are ready to go. You could give them, the task to prepare for the discussion for homework, or you could just like give them a quick reading in class or something like that. And so you draw a map. Like, let's say that this is student A, this is the teacher, yeah, and B and C, and you get the idea. So like, you've got a map of the students around the table, and literally what you're trying to do is you're just like mapping who says something and then who responds. And it just kind of like goes like on and on like this. Maybe you set the timer for like 5 minutes or something. And all this is it's a visualization of the conversation. Yeah. Students, in my experience, they really like this because it's like a representation of who's really contributing to the conversation. It could also be a representation of who's dominating the conversation, right? Because hopefully all voices can be heard. Yeah. So the Harkness model, in my experience, is pretty easy to incorporate into the classroom. You may need to mess around with the seating a bit, get a circular shape in the room. But I'd say like with a group of probably like 12 or less, probably the ideal number is like 12 to 6 to 12, something like that. You can do quite a bit with this model. So I really like this. And yeah, the next thing I wanted to show you is a structured academic controversy. And I really like this activity. I actually just discovered it this past fall, and I've used it twice. I used it once in the fall, and then I used it again in the spring. And I thought it was fantastic, honestly. So I mentioned that these are like alternatives to traditional discussion activities, but I should say that this is more of a variation of a traditional debate. Yeah. So I think we all have the idea of what a debate, what happens in a debate, right? This is a common activity in a conversation class, right? So in a debate, we generally we have two sides, and one side wins, one side loses. Yeah. My biggest grievance with that is that's not reflective of how life actually works. Yeah. Rarely is it that one side completely wins and one side completely loses. Usually there's some kind of compromise, something in the middle. Yeah. And that's what this activity does. So this activity is encouraging students to think about issues, complex issues, and to think about, what is a way to actually resolve them. Yeah. So real world issues, for example, is what you could basically anything you would debate. Yeah. And this depends. Your topic obviously depends on the maturity level of your students and other cultural factors of wherever you are. So basically, the way it works is you have the students and they're working in a pair. Yeah. And they're preparing for one side of an issue. Yeah. So, with my class, we use the issue of artifacts that are in museums that are not like in their country of origin, right? And we talked about that. So essentially, you pair up the students. I usually like to give them materials, but you could have them research it if you want. And the students prepare. So one pair goes first. We could say that this right here is when they begin their debate, if you will. So this pair will present their arguments, right? And meanwhile, pair two, they just record what the other students are saying, right? And then during this, only one group speaks, like, so no interrupting, only listening. Yeah. So we're incorporating both listening and speaking here. And then you just flip it. The other group has the opportunity to speak. And again, pair one, they get the chance to record the ideas. Now, using what the other, you give them a break, and using what the other side has said, you give the students a time to reflect, and then they change sides, yeah? So the group that was in favor is now against, the group that is against is now in favor. And again, they go and they, debate again. So far it sounds like a pretty traditional debate, right? But what I like about this is the final step, yeah? At the very end, you give the students an opportunity for reflection, and it goes from, so we've got a competitive stage right here, yeah? We've got a competitive stage, and then it morphs at the end into a collaborative stage where the students, they take into account all of the issues that have been presented. They have a very educated perspective on the topic now, and the students work together to think about what could work. Yeah, what could be the thing that is the best for this specific controversy. Yeah. So with the example of the artifacts, the students, they came up with brilliant ideas, things that were fantastic. And I really loved it because it was not such a black and white debate, but it was more, it was reflective of just, how controversies generally are resolved in the real world. So anyways, the structured academic controversy is another really effective method you could use in your conversation classes. So moving forward, I wanted to show you just one more technique, and I think that a lot of you might actually be familiar with this already, but perhaps some of you have never used it or never tried it. So let's talk about it. This is called the Jigsaw activity, and yeah, the way it works is basically you first put the class into a home group, okay? And maybe in their home group, they're working with some perhaps, hang on, sorry, I'm just reading the questions here. The children screaming might be mine, I'm sorry about that, yeah. Anyways, the Jigsaw activity. So yeah, the students, you set them up in some kind of home group where like they get to know their peers, and then they have a they have some kind of discussion or some brief getting to know who they're going to work with task, right? And then the students, they move into an expert group, and what you want to do here is you're going to have multiple small groups, and they're going to each have a piece of a larger topic, right? So the students, they're going to, the students are going to, read this information, discuss it, understand the information, and then you're going to move them into Jigsaw groups, right? And the Jigsaw groups, basically how that's going to work is when they get there, they're going to take turns sharing new information and basically having a conversation about the whatever information they were covering. So basically we've got the home group, maybe they have some kind of discussion. Then they go into an expert group where they become experts on a specific piece of information. And then the students, they return to their home group, yeah? And this is where they're each bringing a piece of information back to the table. And they are essentially working towards like combining information through communication to complete a larger task. Yeah. So what this is basically playing on is it's playing on information gap. It's playing on an information gap where no one student has all the information. They require the knowledge of every student in the group in order to complete it and to have a full a full bit of knowledge, as it pertains to the topic. So let me just briefly summarize here about, to me, what I think makes an effective conversation class or an effective conversation task. And I wanted to start off by just saying that perhaps you've seen in all of these activities that essentially I try to make the classroom smaller, right? And what I mean by that is I'm trying to get the students working in small groups where I can monitor the students, and I'm also trying to get them to interact with new peers. With my situation in Poland, my students are in groups, and they're with these same students throughout the day, right? I'm sure a lot of you have a similar teaching context. And a byproduct of that is the students have really strong cliques usually. Like they have their friends, they have the people that they want to sit with, and they don't really interact fully with each other. So I find that sometimes they're a bit too comfortable, and I need to break up the groups, and they often perhaps don't like this, but in the end, it's what's best for them, because it allows them to interact with some new people and to perhaps hear some different perspectives. Moreover, when working with students through conversation, you want to use authentic and meaningful tasks, right? Authentic is especially important due to what we discussed at the beginning with communicative competence and just preparing the students for the use of English in the real world. The task should also be meaningful because obviously the students, it has to matter to them what they're doing, right? And a huge part of a meaningful task is just choosing a topic that the students actually care about, which, there's a lot going on in the world that, students might like to discuss, things like social media, for example. And I generally, at the beginning of every semester with a new group of students, I'll give them some kind of survey to find out what they're into, what they want to talk about. And then I'll basically just fit in some topics into these different methods I've shown you today. So another thing that I find is vital and effective conversation task is that indeed it's something that is a problem that the students can work to solve, or perhaps not solve, that might be ambitious, but it's something that they can at least try to brainstorm some potential solutions. Yeah. And generally, this is through collaboration, through social interaction. And then I've talked about communicative competence quite a bit today, but the last thing I wanted to mention is just about classroom culture and how important that is. So I touched on it when I mentioned about incorporating joy and playfulness into the classroom, but yeah, just having the students feel that they can make mistakes without anybody being critical or laughing at them, because it can be quite demoralizing to make an embarrassing mistake in a second language. So yeah, just trying to build a classroom culture that encourages risk-taking, encourages students to feel like their opinions matter. This means a lot. I guess I have about 10 more minutes. So I wanted to spend just the remainder of the session just showing a couple of resources that I think you might find to be quite useful. And the first one, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but if you visit this website, americanenglish.state.gov, you can find a huge selection of materials. Yeah. I wanted to point out just 3 things in particular that I think are very useful and that you might be able to use right off the bat. Yeah. So perhaps you might be aware of the Monster Book of Language Teaching Activities. It's a really good book. There's a free PDF on the website. If you search the Monster Book, it'll come right up. So it's got 150 activities, right? It's honestly like if you're planning for the next week or something, and you're thinking about, okay, how am I going to present this information? How can I make this interactive or something? This book is an incredible resource. So I really recommend that. Another great resource on the American English website is Critical Creativity in Action. Yeah. And this is like a card deck. So I don't know how feasible it is for you, but I personally printed this out and cut out the cards. I laminated them and I just got them in my bag. And it's just something that's really really useful. Like, there's a huge range of things that the cards cover. And it's just like a fun game that you can break out if you've got like an extra few minutes at the end of class. So anyways, it's quite fun. The different topics covered in the cards is quite extensive. So I definitely recommend you check that out. Yeah. Finally, the last thing I wanted to mention as it relates to American English is the English Teaching Forum. So this is just the journal that's published on the state, on the American English State.gov website. And there are tons of really practical articles in there. They're not all just theoretical bits of information, but it's indeed like discussing like, hey, check out this thing I did with my conversation class last semester, and let me tell you how it worked for me. Yeah, it's things like that. So it might be quite similar to what I've discussed today, where I just gave you some practical activities that I've done with my groups. So you can find a lot of great information in there. So here, I can zoom in a bit just to show you. So this is the American English website right here. And when you click on it, maybe you'll go to resources and programs, and you'll have a drop-down menu where you can find a lot of great stuff. Yeah. You can also click on the English Teaching Forum, which will lead you right here to this. Yeah. I just wanted to show you this one article, just to model that, like, there's a lot of really practical stuff in here. Yeah. So just a little bit of searching on this website, and you can find some really good information. So that's a great resource. Yeah. And here are the two resources that I highlighted. So this is Critical Creativity in Action. And as I mentioned, I've used this and it's quite good. And then this is the Monster Book of Language Teaching Activities. Again, it's pretty in depth. It's like 150 pages, something like that. And it has a lot of information in it. So another resource that I wanted to briefly mention to you is this Gale and Context, Opposing Viewpoints. So this is a resource that I found through the American Corner here in Poland. They have great digital resources, and yeah, it's really great. So I've used it. I think, like, with students, they tend to overuse Google when they're looking for information, and a problem with that is credibility of information. So what I like to do is basically go on to Gale. And they have a lot of different issues on here, it's quite extensive. And you can just choose an issue, and then you can kind of cherry pick different bits of information. So you can find different viewpoint articles. You can look at the lexicon of the articles, because you know your students' levels. Also, the length is there. So I'll probably like, what I like to do is I like to make a packet of information for them. Yeah, I'll say like, okay, so here's a few articles and a couple infographics that I want you to review for homework. And, this is how they can prepare for the discussion that we'll have in our next meeting. Yeah. So that's Gail, and it's a fantastic resource. And if you contact the American Corner in your area, I'm sure that they would be able to help you out with that digital resource. The last thing I wanted to show you as it pertains to resources is this Breaking News English website. This is a great tool. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but these are like ready-made lessons on a variety of topics. They're quite good. I really like the topics that the creator of this website chooses. They're lighthearted. Some of them are quite serious, but anyways, this is a wonderful website. So definitely, if you don't know about this, definitely write that down. It has given me a lot of inspiration when thinking about what types of current events I'd like to discuss with students. So with that being said, I just want to reflect on what we did today. So we started off with a notice and wonder activity. And as I mentioned, this is just a way for you to address a lot of different proficiency levels with student proficiency levels, and to provide a way for everybody to become involved and to contribute to a conversation. It's also a good tool for you to know what your students can do. This is like with a new group of students, I like to use this because nothing's worse than having something that's too easy or too hard with a group. Yeah. So again, we talked about the benefits of incorporating joy and playfulness. We briefly touched on it. We talked about how illustrations can be useful with that. And moving forward, we finished off today's session by just looking at some alternatives to a traditional discussion. And I didn't list it here, but there were a few resources that I added at the end. So with that being said, are there any questions or comments that anybody might have before we finish for today? Perhaps no. Okay, well.
Silent audience.
Yeah, it's all right. If anything comes up, please ask. I'm all ears.
In the meantime, I would like to remind all the participants that the certificate, as usual, has been provided in the chat box, attached to the chat box, so everybody can download it, and no problem for you, because I have received a few direct messages from some of the participants that they would like me to send them the certificate. No need to do it. It's there already. I will attach it once again, just to make sure that everybody gets it. So let me do it. And in the meantime,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Maria Cristina. I'm from Argentina. I am a non-native English teacher. So my question is, if I imagine that all these techniques are really useful when it comes to teaching students from different parts of the world. So if you could share your thoughts or experiences about teaching adults from remote distances, if these activities really work, in the case you have different nationality people in one team.
Remote distances, you mean in terms of like being from provincial areas, something like this? Or what do you, sorry.
No, I'm talking about, I mean, globally, different regions, different cultures. And so in case we teach, and the activities that involve teams, how do you think about, or how do you feel about the progress they make in conversation when it comes to multinational?
I've taught in a variety of contexts. So as I mentioned before, I was teaching in the United States, and in my classes in the US, it was at a university. Basically, all my experience is university level, but in the US, it was very multilingual. All of my students were from many different parts of the world, and yeah, I honestly that. Sorry. Anyways, I was going to say that perhaps with a conversation class, and we didn't really get to talk about this, but when you have like a monolingual group, yeah, more or less all students share the same first language, then it's just a different opportunity, really. So yeah, yeah. So like with my students here in Poland, I definitely encourage them to use Polish to understand complicated ideas, to formulate their thoughts, and then they present in English. Yeah. So I think in terms of like, we're using these activities with different students. You have to keep in mind who your students are. Yeah. So like, for example, the structured academic controversy, that would be probably more appropriate for academic English. Yeah. I teach classes at the American Corner. These are older students who maybe don't have academic backgrounds. And I probably wouldn't use an activity like that there. But definitely, like I might ask them to draw like some vocabulary words, or to I guess just in a nutshell, to answer your question, it depends. Like I like to think of it like, what's my purpose? Yeah, who are my students? And if they don't have academic goals, then I'm probably not going to be using like anything too academically focused in terms of methodology. Yeah. Yeah, I do think that all these activities are versatile and could be used in a variety of different situations.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
There is one more question in the chat box. Sure. What are the best websites or activities if the number of students is just 2? Yes, so individual lessons.
I would go with Breaking News English, honestly. Yeah, as I mentioned, that website is amazing. Like it's like pre-made lessons. You can modify them, of course, like, but that's a really, really good resource. Yeah, I mean, when you have a group of 2, you're basically just, it's a little more individualized. So yeah, I mean, probably you wouldn't be approaching the class like as a traditional like conversation class. It would be more like an individual conversation with that group of 2, or like a seminar or something. But yeah, I mean, it depends on your students' personalities. That if you have 2, what do they like? Do they? I've had small groups in the past as well, and sometimes the students, they'll come in and they'll just want to talk the entire time. So you have to kind of be purposeful about what you're doing with them in order to achieve your goals. So yeah. Introverted learners will also benefit. Well, yeah, it's a complicated issue talking about introverted learners. I think so. I think that one of the main issues with a conversation class is that you've got the extroverts dominating. Yeah, you've got a group of 3 or 4 students who are answering all the questions. Nobody else is getting to talk. So yeah, I think trying to get away from, as I mentioned here, trying to get away from this model is really what you've got to do to help the introverts. Yeah, exactly. They hog the floor for sure. I think we all know those students. I mean, they're wonderful. Yeah, they help us out when the class is very quiet or something. But yeah, like I think getting the shy students to speak is very valuable. And I think that these activities I've shown you here are very good at getting them to communicate. Granted, if I do have some students who have various learning disabilities, and I do take that into account as I design these activities, because for example, some students, I have some autistic students, and they're very uncomfortable with perhaps like working with peers. So I try to accommodate students, of course. So yeah, there is a need to individualize sometimes.
No more questions in the chat box. So it's, I would like to thank you for a wonderful webinar. There have been many positive remarks in the chat box. So people are satisfied to have been instructed by you. I'm one of them, of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because this is also my area of specialization. So thank you very much. Please keep in touch with us. You know, it usually happens in such a way that even if those American fellows go back to the United States, they keep in touch with IATEFL Poland. So please try to remember about it.
Okay. It would be a privilege to do so. So thank you so much. And I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. I am now going to stop recording. Okay. And you will hear the message. Right.